Arthur clutched his glass of brandy, the amber liquid swirling gently as he stared into its depths. The room around him was dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the flickering light of the fireplace. The mansion was silent around him, silent and enormous. Its vast hallways and grand rooms, once filled with laughter and life, now echoed with a haunting emptiness. Paintings worth more than most houses lined the walls, each one a testament to his wealth and success. Yet they felt more like silent judges, their eyes following him wherever he went. Sculptures stood guard in every corner, their cold stone faces offering no comfort. They were reminders of the opulence he had surrounded himself with, but also of the emptiness that came with it. He should have felt happy. He had everything he ever wanted: the wealth, the status, the power. But as he sat there, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that something was wrong, deeply wrong. It gnawed at him, a constant nagging doubt that he couldn't ignore. A shiver ran down his spine. He shouldn't have cheated his way to the top. The shortcuts, the betrayals, the lies, they all weighed heavily on his conscience. His wealth was built on lies and betrayal, each dollar a reminder of the people he had stepped on to get here, the friends he had lost, the enemies he had made, and now he felt it, a presence watching him. It was as if the shadows themselves had come to life, whispering his sins back to him. Arthur took another gulp of brandy, hoping to drown out the voices in his head. The warmth of the alcohol did little to chase away the cold feeling of dread that had settled in his chest. The heavy curtains were drawn, but he felt a cold draft. It was as if the very air in the room was conspiring against him, reminding him of his misdeeds. The fire in the fireplace crackled and popped, a stark contrast to the silence that filled the rest of the mansion. It was a small comfort, but even that seemed fleeting. He was alone, or was he? The feeling of being watched grew stronger, and he couldn't shake the sense that he was not the only one in the room. A low whisper seemed to wind its way around the room, barely audible but unmistakable. It was as if the walls themselves were speaking to him, recounting his every sin. He couldn't quite make out the words, but the tone was clear, accusatory, condemning. It was a voice he couldn't escape, no matter how hard he tried. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. It had to be his imagination, the stress, the guilt. It was all getting to him. It was just the wind, just his imagination. But the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. It clung to him like a second skin. He was letting his guilt get the best of him. He had to remind himself that he had earned his fortune, even if the means were less than honorable. He had to relax. He had earned his fortune, hadn't he? The question lingered in his mind unanswered as the shadows continued to whisper their accusations. A sharp rap on the door startled Arthur. He had been lost in thought, the quiet of the evening wrapping around him like a comforting blanket. The sudden noise shattered the tranquility, sending a jolt through his body. He jumped, spilling brandy on his expensive rug. The amber liquid spread quickly, soaking into the fibers and leaving a dark stain. Arthur cursed under his breath, his heart still racing from the unexpected interruption. The butler, Jenkins, stood in the doorway, his face pale. Jenkins was usually composed, a pillar of calm in the household. But tonight his hands trembled slightly and his eyes darted nervously around the room. "A telegram, sir," he said, his voice trembling. The envelope in his hand was crumpled, as if it had been gripped too tightly. Arthur took it, feeling the cold paper against his skin. It just appeared," Arthur frowned. Telegrams were rare these days, and the timing was odd. He couldn't think of anyone who would send him a message at this hour. Who would send a telegram at this hour? The question echoed in his mind as he glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight, a time when most people were asleep, not sending cryptic messages. He took the telegram from Jenkins, his hand shaking. The butler's unease was contagious, and Arthur felt a growing sense of dread as he held the envelope. The paper felt ice-cold. He unfolded it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Each crease seemed to resist, as if the message inside was reluctant to be revealed. Stop living a lie. You took everything from me. Now it's my turn. The word seemed to burn into his mind. He knew that initial. The word seemed to burn into his mind. He knew that initial. Memories he had long buried began to resurface, each one more painful than the last. He had hoped never to hear from me again. It couldn't be, not after all these years. The past he had tried so hard to forget was now confronting him, demanding answers. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in with the weight of his memories. He crumpled the telegram in his fist, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The paper crinkled under the pressure, but the words remained etched in his mind, unyielding and relentless. The room felt colder now. The whispers were back, louder this time. They seemed to come from every corner, filling the space with their insistent murmur. He could almost make out words, accusations, threats. The voices were familiar, echoes from a time he had tried to erase. They accused him, reminded him of his sins. He wasn't imagining it, he was being watched, haunted. The feeling of eyes on him was unmistakable, a chilling reminder that the past was never truly gone. It lingered, waiting for moments like this to resurface and claim its due. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued Arthur. Visions of his past, of the people he had wronged, flashed before his eyes. He saw their faces, heard their accusations echoing in his ears. He woke up in a cold sweat, his heart racing. The telegram lay on his nightstand, a constant reminder of his sins. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was in danger. But from whom? And what did they want? He had to find out. He had to make things right. He spent the day pacing his mansion, a prisoner in his own gilded cage. The whispers followed him from room to room. He tried to ignore them, to convince himself it was just his guilty conscience. But deep down he knew the truth. He was not alone. Desperate for some sense of normalcy, Arthur decided to host a dinner party. He invited the crème de la crème of society, hoping their laughter and chatter would drown out the whispers that haunted him. The mansion bustled with life for the first time in what felt like forever. But even amidst the clinking glasses and forced smiles, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The whispers seemed to intensify, swirling around him like a malevolent wind. He saw fleeting glimpses of a figure lurking at the edge of the crowd, a shadowy silhouette that vanished as quickly as it appeared. His guests, oblivious to his torment, continued their revelry. Arthur, however, felt a cold hand grip his heart. He knew this charade couldn't last. He was living on borrowed time. As the evening wore on, Arthur's anxiety reached a fever pitch. The grand hall was filled with laughter and music, but Arthur could hear none of it. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each more troubling than the last. The weight of his past actions pressed heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He felt as though the walls were closing in on him, suffocating him with the memories he had tried so hard to bury. He excused himself from the party and retreated to his study, seeking solace in the company of his books. The study, with its towering shelves and leather-bound volumes, had always been his sanctuary. Here he could lose himself in the pages of history and fiction, forgetting the real world and its relentless demands, but tonight even the familiar comfort of his books could not calm his racing heart. But the peace he craved eluded him. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains seemed to whisper accusations in his ear. He paced the room, his mind replaying the events that had led him to this moment. The deals, the betrayals, the lies. Each memory was a dagger stabbing at his conscience. The whispers were deafening now, and the shadowy figure materialized before him, no longer content to lurk in the shadows. It was as if the very air had turned against him, thickening with the weight of his guilt. The figure moved closer, its presence cold and menacing. Arthur's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a painful reminder of his sins. It was a woman, her face obscured by a veil. The veil fluttered slightly as if moved by an unseen breeze, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Arthur's eyes widened in terror as he tried to make sense of the apparition before him. Who was she, and why had she come to torment him? Her eyes, however, burned with an icy fire that sent chills down Arthur's spine. They seemed to pierce through him, seeing into the very depths of his soul. He felt exposed, vulnerable, as if all his darkest secrets were laid bare before her. The intensity of her gaze was unbearable, and he had to look away. "You can't hide from your past," she hissed, her voice a chilling whisper. The words echoed in the room, each syllable dripping with malice. Arthur's blood ran cold as he realized the truth in her statement. He had spent years trying to escape his past, but it had finally caught up with him. "You took everything from me." Her voice was filled with a sorrow that cut through Arthur like a knife. He could feel the weight of her accusation, the pain and anger that fueled her words. It was a pain he had caused, a betrayal he had committed. My fortune, my family, my life, each word was a hammer blow driving home the reality of his actions. Arthur's mind raced as he tried to remember the details of his betrayal, the deals he had made, the lies he had told. It all came flooding back, a torrent of guilt and regret. Arthur stumbled back, his blood turning to ice. He recognized the voice. It was a voice he had hoped never to hear again, a voice from a past he had tried to forget. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless and reeling. It was Eliza, his former business partner, whom he had ruthlessly betrayed to amass his fortune. But Eliza was dead. He had seen to that himself, ensuring that she could never come back to haunt him. Or so he had thought. Now, standing before him, she was more real than any memory, more terrifying than any nightmare. He had made sure of it, hadn't he? Doubt gnawed at his mind, eroding the certainty he had clung to for so long. Had he truly silenced her forever, or had his actions merely set the stage for this haunting confrontation? The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving Arthur trapped in a waking horror of his own making.